Isla Bennett slipped quietly through the dim backstage corridors of the Grand Opera House, her plain overalls and cap making her nearly invisible among the swirls of silk and velvet gowns heading toward the main hall. Tonight was the private unveiling of the new season's centerpiece, an exclusive event with the city's elite gathered to enjoy the lead tenor's much-anticipated performance. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, casting sharp reflections on the polished brass railings. Isla carried her mop with practiced ease, eyes lowered, avoiding interruption of the spectacle unfolding before her. Guests in designer suits and sparkling jewelry chatted under the soaring ceilings, their voices lilting with richness and excitement, dismissing the staff who passed by almost without a glance. Some whispered just loud enough for Isla's keen ears to catch, comments about her threadbare clothes and the slight regional lilt in her speech. She wouldn't understand the aria if it sang to her, one woman murmured with a smirk. Others glanced at her as if she were a fixture, part of the scenery rather than a person. Isla paid no mind. She focused on her steps, steady and unobtrusive, her presence blending seamlessly into the background. The opera lifted with power as the lead tenor's voice filled the cavernous space with rich, soaring notes. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Suddenly, the tenor wavered. His posture sagged, the notes faltered into strained gasps. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as he stumbled, clutching his chest, then collapsed forward on the stage floor, the spotlight still harsh upon him. The room's festive energy shattered in an instant. Guests froze, eyes wide, unsure whether this was part of the act or a sudden catastrophe unfolding before them. A stunned hush fell over the Grand Opera House as the lead tenor lay motionless on the polished stage. The once lively crowd was gripped by disbelief, breaths held, eyes darting between the prone figure and one another. Panic subtly began to ripple beneath the surface, like a wave threatening to break. Some guests instinctively rose from their seats, searching for help or fleeing the scene, while others were frozen in place, paralyzed by shock. The stage manager, a man in a crisply tailored tuxedo, jabbered into his headset with shaky hands, clearly overwhelmed as he tried to coordinate a response. Ushers glanced helplessly at each other, unsure whether to usher the audience out or call for medical aid. Isla stood at the edge of the corridor leading to the stage, her mop still in her hand, eyes fixed on the collapsed man. The murmurs around her grew louder, nearly drowning the low hum of the opera's orchestral accompaniment abruptly fading into silence. "Who is she to think she can do anything?" a sharply dressed woman whispered harshly within earshot. The words stung, but Isla did not flinch. Instead, she took a step forward, then another, her footsteps steady and deliberate. The unexpected surge of courage energized her. All around, the chaos swelled, but she moved with unwavering purpose. In a few long strides, she reached the prone tenor. The fragile hush deepened into complete silence among the onlookers. Isla knelt beside him with a practiced ease born of years of emergency experience, lowering herself into a medical crouch that contrasted starkly against the opulent surroundings. She felt for a pulse at his neck, weak, irregular, and detected the telltale signs of cardiac distress, pallor creeping across his face, rapid, shallow breaths that teetered dangerously close to nothingness. Her voice, calm and firm, cut through the rising tension. "Clear the area. We need room here." Some heads turned toward her, eyes narrowing in surprise or skepticism. A man in a tailored gray suit, an event coordinator, stepped forward hesitantly. "Excuse me, but you need to move aside. This is private, and we have medical professionals arriving," he said, his tone dripping with thinly veiled condescension. Isla looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with quiet authority. "I'm trained in emergency response. This man needs immediate help. The paramedics are not here yet. Please get us some air and find an AED now." The coordinator hesitated, unsure whether to push back against this unexpected authority from someone dressed like a janitor, but a chorus of whispers beneath the crystal chandeliers turned into muttered agreement from other bystanders who recognized the urgency in Isla's voice. An usher sprinted off to the backstage area, nodding firmly. Isla pressed her gloved fingers to the tenor's chest and began administering firm, practiced chest compressions. The room blurred around her, faces locked in anxious anticipation, flashes from dozens of phones capturing the crisis. But Isla kept her focus narrow, precise. She counted compressions silently, coordinating each press with the faint pulse of hope. The lead tenor's breaths were faint and erratic, his body slack beneath her hands. She barked directions over the growing clamor. "Someone get the first aid kit and bring me those gloves." A young stagehand dashed forward with trembling hands to comply. Another guest, a man in a black tie, returned seconds later with the AED, setting it carefully on the rim of the stage amidst a sea of startled onlookers. "Clear the stage," Isla ordered, her voice sharpened by urgency. "Step back, give me space." The staff moved reluctantly, shrinking the crowd to a respectful distance. A wave of tension mixed with confusion rippled, some guests whispering about the odd sight, a lowly janitor taking charge amidst the chaos. As she attached the AED pads to the tenor's bare chest beneath his tuxedo jacket, Isla felt a spark of defiance. They might see her as invisible, as unimportant, but now, this moment hinged on her actions. The machine's automated voice broke the silence, analyzing heart rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." The room held its breath. Seconds ticked endlessly. "Stand clear," Isla instructed sharply, stepping back. She pressed the shock button. The device delivered a jolt. The tenor's body jerked slightly, eyes fluttering open but still glazed, his breaths shallow. Isla resumed chest compressions without hesitation, her hands moving steadily in rhythmic beats. Minutes stretched, and a cool professionalism filled the stage space as Isla led the emergency response. Another usher returned with water and towels, which she used to loosen the tenor's collar and wipe sweat from his brow, working as if she had rehearsed this scene countless times. A voice cracked from the crowd, a guest with tears in her eyes whispered, "She knows exactly what she's doing." Finally, distant sirens echoed through the corridors. The paramedics burst in, their movements swift and assured. Isla met them with a brief but precise handover, describing the tenor's initial collapse, the timing of her interventions, and vital signs. She stepped aside as they took over, their equipment arriving amid a flurry of urgent preparation. The mood in the opera house shifted palpably. The crowd stayed muted, watching the professionals with tense hope. But eyes often flickered back to Isla, her calm expression, the faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, the way she stood quietly, neither seeking praise nor retreating into the background. The stage manager approached her then, his earlier anxiety replaced with newfound respect. "That was incredible. I didn't realize you had that skill." Isla nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I just did what had to be done. The important thing is that help arrived in time." The tenor, now stabilized, was lifted on a stretcher and carefully wheeled away. The room exhaled collectively, murmurs of relief mingling with awe. Where earlier there had been doubt and dismissal, now eyes shone with quiet admiration. Attempts at conversation began again, but the topic was unanimous: the janitor who saved the lead tenor. Guests who had been whispering disparaging remarks exchanged looks, their expressions reflective, as if reconsidering their earlier judgments. The condescending glances were replaced by a silent acknowledgement of the skill and courage that had pierced the glitz and glamour of the evening. As the opera house slowly regained its rhythm, the spotlight unexpectedly shifted, not to the star performer, but to the woman who had knelt alone beneath it, steadying a life. And in that charged silence, the whispered phrase rippled anew through the crowd: "Isla Bennett." Long before the polished steps and glittering chandeliers of the opera house crowds, Isla Bennett had worn a different kind of uniform, the crisp, navy blue and white paramedic attire of the city's emergency medical service. The sharp, cool air of the ambulance bay had been her domain, the screech of sirens a daily rhythm. Years had passed in a blur of tense calls and adrenaline-fueled decisions. In one flashback, Isla moved through a crowded city street, responding swiftly to a frantic call about a collapsed man. Nurses and bystanders gave way as she knelt beside the victim, expertly checking his airway, adjusting his pulse, issuing clear commands to a partner. Her hands were steady, her voice calm but insistent. "We need oxygen and a defibrillator, now." The man's labored breathing eased as she applied a mask, her attentive care steadying the chaos around her. Her focus never wavered. Colleagues admired her skill, patients remembered her gentle reassurance. In the cramped hospital emergency room, doctors sought her assessments. She was known for thinking fast, acting faster. Her commitment was unquestioned, her presence a natural anchor in storms of crisis. But beneath the professional exterior, a private storm gathered strength. The scene shifted to a small, bright bedroom, a place heavy with shadows. Isla cradled a tiny hand, the skin translucent, the fragile breaths uneven and quick. Her husband stood nearby, his eyes fixed on their child. The alarm on the monitor beeped irregularly. "It's an allergic reaction," Isla's voice cracked as she administered an epinephrine injection, but the child's condition deteriorated. The frantic rush to the hospital, the blurred faces of nurses, the relentless ticking of the clock, all converged into a crushing silence. It was too late. The tragedy left Isla shattered, her world rearranged by grief that would not relent. She withdrew from her paramedic calls, unable to face the unyielding urgency and the ever-present risk of loss. The medical sirens she once found solace in became unbearable reminders of the child she could not save. Another flashback showed Isla packing a small bag, tears streaming as she left her apartment in the city's bustle. She surrendered her badge, quietly walked away from a profession she loved. The hum of her life altered, where once she was at the front line of life or death, now she sought refuge in simplicity. Returning to her hometown was like stepping into a familiar silence. She took the janitor's job at the opera house, choosing its quiet corners and shadowed passageways over bustling emergency rooms. She kept her head low, her past carefully cloaked beneath simple clothes and a downturned gaze. "Better to be invisible," she thought, "than to be reminded of what I lost." In the cloakroom, she cleaned spilled glasses and wiped fingerprints from brass doorknobs, moving methodically, her hands still possessing that practiced precision honed in medical emergencies, but those only found private moments. No one here sought her advice in moments of crisis. The whispers about her accent, the thinly veiled judgment from the polished crowd, reminded her daily of the distance between this life and the one she left behind. A moment of solitude showed Isla sitting on a worn bench during a rare break, staring at a faded photo tucked in her pocket, a picture of her child, vivid and full of life, a bittersweet treasure. The sorrow that accompanied it was quiet but persistent. Yet, even as she tried to shrink into the background, remnants of her former self remained ready, instincts sharpened by countless emergencies, knowledge ingrained deep into muscle memory, a calm center forged through years of facing chaos. She was no stranger to responsibility. She carried the weight of lives saved and lives lost, an unspoken history that she guarded closely. In another memory, Isla stood calmly in a storm-drenched alley, guiding a panicked woman through first aid instructions as they waited for help. Her voice was soft but firm, the presence of authority unnoticed amid the rain-soaked night but unmistakably real. She knew what it was like to hold the fragile line between hope and despair. Those memories contrasted sharply with the present where she was treated as invisible, dismissed as part of the background noise rather than a person capable of impact. Her move here was not about giving up, it was about healing, retreating to a place where grief could be contained. She didn't anticipate that the very skills she thought she'd buried would be called upon in a moment of crisis tonight, beneath the very chandeliers that sparkled above, where ghosts of her past and present might collide again. Yet, tonight was different. Tonight, the instinct that had saved countless lives flickered awake beneath her humble exterior. The years of training and trauma, loss and quiet resilience blended into resolve. In the face of panic and disbelief, to rise, to act, to reclaim part of herself that she thought lost forever. And so, though she had chosen this simple job, tonight Isla Bennett would step beyond the shadows she had hidden in for so long. She was no longer just a janitor. In the silence behind the curtains and the gasps of the crowd lay a story still unfolding, one she could not ignore any longer. The murmurs on the grand balcony had transformed into a hum, and then a chorus of voices filled with awe and gratitude. The guests at the private opera night were still processing the evening's extraordinary turn, the collapse of the lead tenor and the swift, life-saving intervention that had followed. And at the heart of these hushed conversations was one unexpected figure, Isla Bennett, the janitor who had stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight. Guests who had arrived with champagne glasses in hand now approached Isla with genuine appreciation. A woman in a shimmering emerald gown, her voice trembling slightly, reached out and took Isla's hand. "You saved him," she said simply, eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "I was so scared." "Thank you." Around them, others nodded in agreement, the air warm with a collective sense of relief and admiration. Isla, still wearing her worn overalls and dirt-smudged cap, nodded quietly but didn't retreat. She accepted the thanks with a soft smile that carried neither pride nor shame, just a steady affirmation of the truth. Despite the newfound respect, some guests still glanced with surprise, their preconceived notions about her slipping away layer by layer. The crisp orderliness of privilege had been disrupted, if only momentarily, by her calm and skilled hands. Among the staff, the transformation was even more pronounced. Earlier, Isla had been overlooked, her presence barely acknowledged by others. Now, colleagues who had ignored her morning greetings paused to offer sincere compliments. Marcus, a stagehand who had barely spoken to her before, clapped her gently on the back. "I saw what you did. You were amazing. We've all got your back now." The janitorial team exchanged glances, a newfound pride sparking in their eyes as they shared whispers about their unlikely hero. News cameras were not present during the event, but smartphones yielded an unexpected wave of public recognition. Attendees hurried to post videos, capturing the dramatic moment. Isla knelt resolutely beside the collapsing tenor, her voice commanding yet composed amid the rising panic. The footage spread swiftly through social media channels, with hashtags praising the janitor who saved the tenor, trending locally within hours. A prominent guest, a noted philanthropist who had been seated near the scene, gave a tearful interview. "I thought I was witnessing a tragedy unfolding live," she said, voice choked with emotion. "But to see this woman step forward, without hesitation, was breathtaking. She reminded us all of the power of courage and skill beyond appearances." The interview replayed repeatedly on local news platforms, weaving Isla's name into countless conversations. Simultaneously, online communities began piecing together Isla's story. Previously unnoticed images surfaced from events past, photos of a confident woman in paramedic uniform, wearing a badge of dedication and strength. Old interviews appeared, recorded before she vanished from the public eye, praising her commitment to saving lives and her calm under pressure. Comments flooded in, honoring her bravery and lamenting the invisibility that life had imposed in recent years. Within the walls of the opera house, the evening's events had broken certain unspoken rules. The divide that once seemed permanent, between the polished elite and the janitorial staff, blurred. Seedlings of respect and empathy took root where judgment and silence had grown. Patrons greeted Isla with warm smiles, nods, even brief conversations that strayed from their usual formality. One guest, an older woman with a silver-streaked bun, paused near Isla and said, "You showed true grace tonight. It's an honor to meet you." Isla responded with a genuine smile, her eyes reflecting quiet gratitude. The encounter with management was different. The opera director, a reserved man in his 60s, sought Isla out shortly after the emergency teams had left. "Miss Bennett," he began carefully, "your actions were nothing short of heroic. I can only imagine what you felt in those moments." Isla shrugged gently, the weight of recognition unfamiliar but oddly comforting. He continued, "We would be honored to find ways to support you and ensure your talents are recognized here." Isla nodded, though she was unsure what this new openness might bring. She had spent years building walls to shelter herself from expectation and rejection. Now those walls trembled under the light of acknowledgement. Backstage and in the staff break rooms, the story transformed Isla's relationships with coworkers. A few hours earlier, she had existed as a peripheral figure. Now, she was at the center of conversations, invitations to join meals, offers to help carry supplies. The opera house, once a stage for isolation, had become a space of tentative community. Despite this, Isla remained grounded. The memories of her past, layered with both pride and pain, stayed close beneath the surface. The loss that had driven her away from paramedics' badges had never fully left her heart. But now, as recognition blossomed, the possibility of reconnecting with that part of herself stirred within. As the night wound down, and the final respectful applause from the trembling crowd echoed through the ornate hall, Isla stood quietly at the edge of the stage. She watched as the tenor was carefully moved to his waiting transport, feeling a complex swirl, humility, strength, and an unexpected flicker of hope. Outside, social media buzzed with admiration and heartfelt stories about her. Messages poured in from strangers and friends alike, painting Isla in the light she deserved: brave, skilled, compassionate. Lines of encouragement and thanks folded around her name. Soon enough, discussions appeared in local newspapers and blog posts, revisiting Isla's time as a paramedic, sharing anecdotes from her past colleagues who remembered a woman whose courage and dedication had saved countless lives. A long-faded chapter was being reopened, but this time with reverence rather than judgment. Still, Isla's eyes remained downcast in moments, her modest nature humbling every compliment. She had lived in the shadows for so long that this sudden brightness was almost overwhelming. Yet, beneath the humility, a quiet shift took place, a readiness to no longer let herself be ignored, to embrace the full scope of who she was. The once invisible janitor had become undeniable, not just in the eyes of the world around her, but in her own heart. The evening had changed everything, from whispered doubts to heartfelt praise, from isolation to connection. And as Isla Bennett moved through the cloakrooms and corridors of the opera house, now met with greetings and smiles rather than glances away, she felt the stirrings of something new: acceptance, confidence, and perhaps even the promise of renewal. Days passed since the dramatic rescue at the opera house, and Isla Bennett found herself caught between worlds, straddling the quiet life she had built and the attention her courage had unexpectedly brought. Each morning, she arrived at her usual shift with the worn mop in hand, but the weight in the air felt different now. No longer overlooked, she was greeted with nods, smiles, and even friendly small talk from guests and colleagues alike. The invisible walls she had lived behind began to dissolve, replaced by tentative bridges of recognition. One afternoon, as Isla wiped down the brass railing near the main entrance, a sharply dressed woman approached her with a purposeful stride. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Elena Ramirez, an official representative from the city's emergency medical training center. Her gaze held a mixture of admiration and urgency. "Isla Bennett?" she asked, her voice warm but direct. Isla looked up, cautious yet curious. Yes, that's me. I'm here on behalf of the training center. Your actions during the opera night were nothing short of remarkable. We've reviewed the footage and heard from witnesses. It's clear you possess skills beyond what your current role reflects. Elena paused, offering a gentle smile. We would like to extend an invitation for you to join our elite paramedic recertification program. The words hung in the air. An open seat in a program designed to reacquaint experienced professionals with the latest emergency protocols and technologies. It was more than an offer, it was a signal that her expertise was sought and valued once again. Isla's breath caught. The memories she had kept locked away, the hospital corridors, the adrenaline of life or death moments, the devastating loss that led her to step back, all surfaced with startling clarity. She shook her head slightly, unsure. I'm not sure. It's been a long time. I'm not sure I'm ready to step back into that world. Elena nodded sympathetically but did not press further. I understand this isn't an easy decision. But the gratitude from those you've helped, the community standing behind you, you didn't just save a man on stage. You reminded all of us why expertise and courage matter. If you reconsider, we will support you every step of the way. Over the following days, Isla wrestled with the offer. Walking through the same halls where she had once been invisible, she now encountered friends and strangers who regarded her with respect. Messages poured in from acquaintances, former colleagues, and grateful attendees of the opera night. They spoke of her skill, her bravery, and urged her not to let fear dictate her future. One evening, as she sat with a cup of tea, a letter arrived, an official acceptance notice from the Emergency Medical Training Center, along with a scholarship funded by a foundation supporting single mothers returning to the workforce in medical fields. The handwritten note attached read, "For your strength and dedication. Welcome back." Tears blurred Isla's vision. The door she thought long closed whispered open once more. The day she reported to the training center was crisp and bright. She donned a fresh uniform that fit differently than her janitor's clothes, the emblem of the emergency service shining on her sleeve. Standing in the classroom, surrounded by fellow professionals brushing up on medical skills, Isla felt a knot of nervous anticipation. Yet beneath it was a steady core of determination. Her instructors welcomed her warmly, acknowledging her experience and recognizing the unique perspective she brought. Days filled with intense training, simulations, and lectures reignited her passion and reminded her that the skills she had honed years ago were still deeply rooted within. When a session involved practicing rapid emergency responses, Isla's hands moved with the same precision and confidence that had saved that night at the opera. Instructors watched, impressed by the seamless combination of knowledge and calm under pressure. Her classmates looked to her as both a peer and sometimes a mentor. In quieter moments, Isla allowed herself to reflect, not just on her past loss but on the resilience that had sustained her. The grief remained, etched lightly beneath the surface, but it no longer consumed her. Weeks later, as the program neared completion, Isla received an unexpected invitation. The city's Emergency Medical Training Center planned to hold a public seminar on emergency response techniques, featuring speakers who exemplified courage and community service. Isla was asked to co-lead a session alongside senior instructors. Standing before a captivated audience, both medical professionals and civilians, Isla shared her story, brief and honest, from paramedic to janitor, from grief to quiet survival, and finally back to embracing her calling. Her voice was steady, eyes scanning the room filled with attentive faces. "You never lose what's inside you," she told them. "Sometimes, it just takes time to find the strength to bring it forward again." After the seminar, a young woman approached her, eyes bright. "You saved my sister at the opera. Thank you, Isla. You gave her a second chance." In that moment, Isla felt the cycle come full circle, the invisible becoming visible, the hidden strength recognized and honored. The woman's words ignited something deeper within her. That evening, walking home beneath the streetlights, Isla thought of the journey behind her, the loss, retreat, and the unexpected turn that led back to the world she loved. She knew the path forward would not be without challenges, but for the first time in years, she looked ahead without fear. She arrived at her modest apartment, greeted by the soft laughter of her child playing nearby. Isla knelt to open her arms wide. The embrace she shared was warm and real, a quiet affirmation of everything that had led to this moment. No longer invisible, no longer afraid, Isla Bennett was ready to step fully into her strength. The uniform she now wore was not just fabric and badge, it was a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power to save lives once again.